Yesterday, Nintendo let something pretty important slip up in the fine messaging for the new Nintendo Switch virtual game cards, where they said here, quote, compatible systems must be linked to a Nintendo account to use virtual game cards. Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive games and Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games can only be loaded on a Nintendo Switch 2 system. Now, we still don't know what exactly this is, which is why today I want to speculate with you all, what exactly is a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition? What is that? The obvious logical jump is, okay, this is what Nintendo is going to call their cross-gen upgrades and next-gen patches for existing Switch 1 games on the Switch 2, but what exactly are they going to do with this? What does it mean to be a Switch 2 Edition game? Which games will get Switch 2 Edition patches? And maybe most importantly of all, how are they gonna sell these to us? Because, listen, I really, really hope they're free. We're talking about Nintendo here, so I imagine there will be some sort of fee attached to getting a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition game. So that's what we're talking about in this video. I already posted 2 other videos earlier today. Definitely check those out. But if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo speculation, theories, discussion, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Okay, so this popped up yesterday, and I wasn't really quite sure what to make of it. It feels weird that Nintendo let this slip in. The entire Nintendo Switch virtual game cards thing definitely feels like them future-proofing for Switch 2. It is Switch 2 news, even though it will be on Switch 1. It's them just kind of laying the groundwork, paving the road for the Switch 2 launch, and that'll be a feature on Switch 2. But now in the fine print, they've accidentally revealed something, and that is these Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games. Nintendo always has to be cute with it, man. They can't just call it a cross-gen, release or a patch. It's a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition. But it's important to note that the distinction on the website is that it is a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition versus Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive game. So I really do think that the likeliest outcome for what this actually is going to be patches for Nintendo Switch 1 games on Switch 2. The question now is, how far are they going to go? What games will get patches, and what does it mean? Like, how far are Nintendo going to go with patching these games to make them look and run better on the Nintendo Switch? I, in the past, have been very kind of against the idea of it, not because I don't want it, just because generally speaking, Nintendo wants to sell games again. We've been talking about Breath of the Wild 4K. I've been talking about maybe Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition or something like that, right? I know it's extremely anti-consumer, but I just wouldn't have been surprised if Nintendo tried to sell those again for full price with all the DLC included. But it sounds like they're going to go a different route here and kind of offer not necessarily something akin to Xbox's Smart Delivery, but some sort of way to really make these Switch 1 games look better on Switch 2 and also maybe have some Switch 2 exclusive features. I just hope that it is either free or maybe tied to NSO. I could see them making this a benefit of a new Switch Online tier, maybe exclusive to the expansion pack, something like that. I'd really rather not have to pay $20 to $30 per upgrade. That's still better than paying for them again outright for a new copy of the game, which is what they used to do, right? With like the new Play Control on Wii. So hopefully they're free, and if they're not free, I guess the second best option would be tied to NSO. I know a lot of people would not like that, but I can already see the outrage storm right now when they announce that these things cost like $20 a pop. With all that said, the fact that they're actually going to be doing this is a very good sign, and something that I think is necessary given what we saw in yesterday's Nintendo Direct. I personally have been expecting them to support the Nintendo Switch for a long time after the Switch 2 releases. However, I expected a lot of that support to be with ports, remasters, and remakes. Yesterday, we saw a new Tomodachi Life game announced, which if you missed my video earlier today, I expect to be a massive, massive success. Maybe one of the best-selling Switch games. Like, I think it could break into the top 10. They announced that for 2026 as a Switch 1 game. So we're gonna have to pay close attention to what Nintendo's cross-generation strategy is here, because a game like Tomodachi Life, while maybe it sells mostly on Switch 1, I'm going to be playing it on Switch 2. Will there be a benefit there? It's not a graphically intensive game, but could there be something there that makes the Switch 2 version stand out from the Switch 1 version, even beyond graphics, right? I was talking to some friends, and I think a great thing they could do, please, Nintendo, I have been begging for this for a long time. But what if, as part of the Switch 2 editions that we get on these games, what if they had trophies, right? Like, what if that's one of the benefits? Beyond graphics, right? I think like Monolith Soft and a lot of these developers would do graphical patches. Maybe they had ray tracing to some select games. 4K upscaling would be, I guess, the easiest thing to do. But what if they actually add stuff to them that kind of makes it more worthwhile from a gameplay perspective? And I think trophies is something that would really add a lot of value. I don't expect Nintendo to ever go back and retroactively do every single Nintendo Switch game and add trophies to those. But if they have a select lineup of Switch 2 edition games, games that do have trophies. I think that would be a great way to make them more enticing, especially to a lot of Nintendo's audience that doesn't really care about graphics, right? I mean, we all do care about graphics to an extent, but I think a lot of Nintendo fans are more about gameplay. And trophies, while they don't directly affect gameplay, they do give you more value out of their games. So beyond graphics, beyond resolutions and all that, trophies, I think, is actually a really great thing that they could add to make these more enticing. It's also just like free content, right? This would be such an easy thing to do, but now that we have this Nintendo Today app, I could totally see once a month, in addition to our regularly scheduled NSO updates of classic games, maybe we have some sort of update where, let's say, Luigi's Mansion 3, they go back and update that game, maybe they make it look a little bit prettier, but they also add trophies, they also add maybe some more online chat functionality, depending on what that C button actually is, something like that. Ways to entice people beyond just graphics. I think that's something very important Nintendo could do beyond just what PlayStation and Xbox do in terms of just, it's prettier now. The next biggest question or concern I guess I have is, what does this mean for native Switch 2 versions? Myself and many others thought that for some select games, they would actually just release a Nintendo Switch version and a Nintendo Switch 2 version, most notably with Metroid Prime 4. What happens with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond? After we saw it yesterday, I think a lot of people have shifted to thinking it is just a Switch 1 game. That would almost certainly get a Switch 2 edition, but what about a Switch 2 version? Can Switch 2 edition games have their own box on the store shelf? Because for me, a part of the reason I was rooting for Prime 4 Beyond to be a Nintendo Switch 2 game at launch so much was because I wanted it to have that retail presence as a Switch 2 game. I wanted it to be marketed as a Switch 2 game. If it just gets a Switch 2 edition, depending on how they market these things, that doesn't necessarily feel like that big of a deal, right? It is still just a Switch 1 game, so I wonder how they would handle the marketing here. Ideally, every single game that releases on the Switch 1 after the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out would have some sort of Switch 2 edition, especially if there are other benefits beyond just performance, right? Frame rates, that's great. I'm going to be really happy with the frame rate upgrades that all of these games will get, but if they had trophies, like even if something like Yoshi's Woolly World comes out, that game doesn't need the boost of the Switch 2, I don't think. But if there's other features like trophies, that would be really cool. It's just so weird because a game like Tomodachi Life is going to sell for several years based on the internet's reaction to it. I mean, we're talking about potentially a New Horizons tier game in terms of software sales. So Nintendo's going to want to have that game out on store shelves and in the zeitgeist for several years. I imagine even after the Nintendo Switch 1 is discontinued, they don't manufacture it anymore. So I think for Nintendo Switch 2 edition games, I would still like to see some sort of retail presence, some sort of separate SKU, I guess. But if it is just a patch, that's a little weird, right? I'm excited to see Nintendo actually detail all of this, presumably in the April 2nd Nintendo Direct. It's still very funny to me that they let it slip in the fine prints for the virtual game cartridges. And then there's also the question of, well, first-party games will likely have these. Can we get third-party games that have them as well? I think about games like The Witcher 3 or Doom 2016 and Eternal. Will they go back and do Switch 2 editions of those? Is it on a third-party publisher-by-publisher basis? Do they even have access to whatever this would be? I would hope so, because I don't want to have to pay for Witcher 3 again or Doom 2016. I'd rather just get either a slight fee to upgrade it, or ideally a free upgrade, because I imagine a lot of third parties will want to go back and upgrade those games, because a lot of Switch 1 ports of third parties, especially those that came from the PS4, are not very good, so they're going to want to put a more playable version of their games on that console. Borderlands, I mean, all of those are on there, right? You can imagine Take-Two wants to patch those and make them look a lot better on the Switch 2. Will that be a Switch 2 edition? Or will there just be a Switch 2 version? The wording is going to get very confusing as Nintendo tries to explain this thing, which I am a little worried about that as well. The virtual game cards thing yesterday, I don't think they explained very well at all. There were so many people in my comments, but also I saw other posts on social media of people just being like, I don't get it. What's the point of this? You can already do this. It is a good thing. Virtual game cards is a good thing. It is a little scary, I guess, for the future of physical media, but all in all, it is a good feature to have. They just explained it really poorly. So I hope that when we're getting our deep dive on the Switch 2 editions in that Nintendo Direct, they make sure the messaging is very concise and they nail it, and that we don't have to be left wondering well, what did you mean? I hope they're really able to just tell us first and foremost, hey, this is what it is. It's actually not that confusing. You just either pay a fee, it's free, or you subscribe to NSO, whatever the case is. I hope they make the messaging very concise here. With all that said, I am excited to see what games get these. Once again, I was kind of in the mindset of we weren't going to get that many patches, but then there was some stuff in the files of Xenoblade Chronicles X suggesting there is a 60 FPS mode. I mentioned it in a video earlier today. I said Thousand Year Door had a widescreen mode in the files. I meant to say it had a 4K resolution mode in the files. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Someone corrected me in the comments. So those are two games that would be awesome to see. And if we're getting patches for Thousand Year Door, to me that would indicate that we're going to get a lot of games. We'll see how far back they go. Maybe Thousand Year Door and Xenoblade X. I mean, these games were in development alongside Switch 2 likely, so maybe those were just kind of baked into the development process. But will they go back and do games from 2019? Will we see a Mario Maker 2 Switch 2 edition? Will we see Breath of the Wild? I once again think it's kind of weird to get a patch for that when I think they could sell it again if they wanted with all the DLC. Xenoblade 2, 3, could we see the Kirby games get them? Fire Emblem, Three Houses, and Engage, all of the Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors games, they could greatly benefit from a performance boost. I hope if they're going to go hard on this, they go hard and just do everything, basically. Any game that has any frame rate issues, just go back and make them a Switch 2 edition. But if they do go back and add something like trophies or achievements, this is going to be a fantastic way for them to keep the gamers engaged with just everything. I mean, we're going to have a consistent release cycle on Switch 1 and Switch 2 for the foreseeable future, right? A game a month on average, I would imagine. But then if we also have once a month, they go back and do a random game and they add trophies and they kind of breathe some new life into it, that would be really cool. Really cool. And maybe the Switch 2 edition games, maybe the base Switch 1 version, maybe they discount those, right? Maybe we get some sort of Nintendo Select pricing tier for games, but then you upgrade them. There's a lot of questions I have. I'm very excited to see how they market this and how they explain it and what it actually is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What Nintendo Switch 2 edition games do you want to see? What games do you want to see get upgraded from the Switch 1 over to Switch 2? I'd love to get a conversation going down below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch content, theories, discussion, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my other channel at It's Amiibo and click on one of these two videos here to listen to me ramble about Nintendo even longer. Until next time, folks. Peace. I was drinking a Gatorade while recording this video, so my tongue is, it's a little blue.